Start button now. Okay, so we've gone live. Let me just take a second to see who we've got. Great. It is August, so we've got a relatively small audience tonight. And I am actually looking to see, there's Michael McCarthy. Great. So we'll be promoting him to a panelist here in just a moment as we get to that agenda item on the bid. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the August meeting of the ANC 1B Economic Development Committee. We'll review the agenda here in just a moment, but we will start with our roll call. Krishna Kumar,
Present.
Frank Chauvin,
Present.
Karen Gall.
Present.
Ian Hawksworth is traveling and is not able to join. Howard Kurtzman.
Present.
David Martin.
Present.
Tanya Shand.
She's here.
I know she is. And myself, I am here. So we have our quorum. Agenda tonight, we've got mostly an old business agenda item, mostly an old business agenda. We're going to hear from Howard Kurtzman on the Vacant to Vibrant Act that was passed by Council at its last round of votes in July. It's a big deal. A lot of work has been going into that. Howard has been very much involved in that work. So looking forward to an update on that. I think that's going to have a really positive impact on 1B. Krishna is going to provide an update, a brief update on the sale and closure of the Source Theater and some of the questions and considerations that I think that raises for all of us in kind of economic development, but also along Main Streets, along the U Street corridor. And then we've got two old business items that will be, I think, the main thrust of our meeting tonight. The first will be an update from Michael McCarthy from Quadrangle Development on the ongoing work that they have been doing to advance and formalize the bid structure, the U Street bid structure. And then lastly, we will be revisiting the 1617 development resolution that we spent a lot of time on at our last meeting. And just to clarify to the community that's joining us tonight, the committee members already know there was a review of that language at the ANC meeting and a request to bring it back to the committee for further work. So we have been working on a new streamlined resolution. We'll be putting that up on the screen and discussing it together as a group as we get to that last agenda item. So with that said, maybe I'll start with just a general remark, which is the last 2 weeks in DC have been different. They have been frustrating and maybe a bit troubling. I'm not going to opine very much. I do owe my community an update on a factual front. But one of the facts that I want to share in the context of economic development is that folks are not going out on the streets. Folks are not going to restaurants. Folks are not spending money along our corridor. I think that there are lots of people. In this case, I'll only speak for myself to say that crime on U Street has been an issue. We have all been looking at the stats, and it does need to be addressed. But there are right ways to do things, and there are ways that are disruptive and somewhat counterproductive. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of folks getting scared away from our local businesses. And so my kind of plea to this group in attendance tonight is go out and support your local businesses if you're able. Encourage other people that you know, if they are able, to go out and support our local businesses. I think that this is somewhat akin to the shutdown that we had in COVID. And we're going to need to make some investments and support our businesses if we want to see them as we come out the other side of all this. So that is just my own kind of personal plea, but in the context of economic development and supporting and continuing to invest in our business partners along the corridor. With that said, Howard, I will turn it to you for an update on Vacant to Vibrant.
Sure, thanks. Let me find my notes. Okay, so this is actually good news, I think, in DC. Over the last month, the council passed and the mayor signed the Vacant to Vibrant Amendment Act of 2025. That act seeks to reduce the numbers of vacant and blighted properties in DC. And just to be clear, blighted properties are a subset of vacant. They're not only vacant, but they've been designated as dangerous for safety reasons or health reasons. And properties covers both properties that have buildings on them and properties that are vacant lots. And I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. So the legislation is the result of several years of advocacy by various groups, including ANCs, including resolutions from this ANC. It's also the product of work of a committee of community members set up, I guess, 2 years ago by Council Chair Phil Mendelson. And I talked about this history at the May meeting and I think at previous meetings, so I won't go into all of that now. But the law that was passed and signed takes the form of amendments to previous DC laws regarding vacant and blighted properties. The legislation includes a wide range of provisions and is probably, from what I can tell, the most comprehensive legislation on vacant and blighted properties in the country. So these provisions revise and expand previous law in such areas as defining vacancy and blight, requirements for registration of vacant properties with penalties if they're not registered, a new idea of vacant property maintenance plans, which owners will have to produce, some issues related to the inheritance of properties, wills and titles. Often properties become vacant when the owner passes away and no one else really takes responsibility for the property. Grants and tax credits for home rehabilitation, also rehabilitation, tax abatement for commercial property rehabilitation, and expedited permit reviews for rehabilitation to prevent buildings from falling into blight. There are provisions related to property taxes concerning rates, exemptions from higher rates, payment plans, and so on. And in the most extreme case, the provisions cover receivership and tax sales of properties by the district government. And I wanted to point out that as part of the legislative process, Council received 2 reports assessing the bill. One was a fiscal impact statement from the DC Chief Financial Officer, and that report estimated that full implementation of the bill would cost about $15 million in the first year and $89 million over the first 4 years. And these costs are mainly for additional staff in various agencies. Now, there are about 3,400 vacant properties currently registered in the city, so there's a lot of work to be done, and so staff would be needed. And the financial officer pointed out that these funds are not in the 2026 budget, and they're not included in current budget planning for the next several years. So, and this is my comment now, further advocacy will be needed to find the needed funds for implementation of this legislation. But I would point out that even partial implementation at a lower cost could still do a lot of good. The various provisions of the law are pretty much independent, so you can pursue some of them without necessarily pursuing all of them. And you can pursue some of them to a certain degree. You don't have to fully implement, in all neighborhoods, all in the same year, for example. You could maybe focus on high priority cases for a lower amount. The second report was the racial equity impact statement from the Council Office of Racial Equity. And that report concluded that implementation of the bill would, in fact, likely enable members of Black, Latino, and person of color communities who have lower incomes to retain their homes and keep them in good repair. It would also benefit seniors and persons with disabilities in the same ways. And the bill would prevent vacancies of other buildings in the neighborhoods where members of those groups may reside. So that was a positive assessment of the legislation. Now, both of these reports do a nice job of summarizing the legislation in a form that is more accessible than the technical language of the law itself. So I would recommend you look at them if you want to pursue this topic further. And you can find the reports on the bill website. And I put the website in the chat. ANCs are mentioned several times in the law. The law says that one route for classifying properties as vacant or blighted involves ANCs passing resolutions calling for the government to classify specific properties as such. ANCs are also to be notified of such classification decision and of any appeals by property owners. Sometimes an owner wants to challenge the claim that the property is vacant. And I believe that this further opens the way for ANCs to pass resolutions calling for various specific actions to be taken on vacant and blighted properties in their neighborhoods. I think the law raises the status of ANCs in addressing vacant and blighted properties. I'm almost done. Regarding future work, I said that a major challenge will be to find funding to implement the law. Also, although it is wide-ranging, the law still does not cover everything that people are concerned about, and I'll mention just two areas. First, most of the law's provisions are relevant only or primarily to residential properties, but various parties, including this ANC, have asked that more be done to address vacant commercial properties. Most of the provisions, not all, but most of the provisions in the law as I said, are relevant to residential properties only. So we need more thinking and action in the area of vacant commercial properties. Secondly, previous laws, which this law amends, cover both vacant buildings and vacant lots, empty lots. But these amendments in this latest legislation only talk about vacant buildings. And I don't know if that was intentional or if it's a drafting error. So we're going to have to get some resolution on that. And I want to thank Frank Chauvin for pointing this out to me. And related to that, another issue raised by Frank at the May meeting, and I hope I'm capturing this right, Frank, is whether vacant lots can also be designated as blighted and charge the highest property tax rate, which is class 4. From what I can tell, the answer appears to be yes, but it is very rare for that to be done. The city's database shows many lots are charged the class 3 vacant rate, but only a handful are charged the class 4 blighted rate. By contrast, there is a significant number of buildings charged the class 4 blighted rate buildings. And I'm not sure why that is. Perhaps the lots designated as blighted once had a building on them that was torn down, but we're not sure. So overall, we're going to seek greater clarity related to vacant and blighted lots. Finally, as many of you know, there is a vacant property caucus, which is a non-official body composed of ANC commissioners and other liaisons from across the district. I've been serving as the liaison from this committee on behalf of ANC 1B. I expect that the caucus will be discussing these issues and others that people are concerned about as we move forward. So I'll stop there and see if there are any further comments or questions.
Great. Howard, thank you for all of that and the very well organized overview. And thank you also for having been so involved in this effort over the years. Any questions for Howard? Frank, go ahead. And Frank, you're muted if you're talking.
I'm being shaken around by my software here, so sorry, Howard. I missed your comment on. So there is existing legislation with respect to vacant lots, and there's no enumeration in this new legislation regarding vacant lots. And do I understand this clearly that in either, so I mean, with respect to both bills, there is no enhanced tax charges or increased taxes for any vacant land or land that is not improved by a structure. Am I correct?
Well, let me clarify. So past legislation that's been around for years and years refers to both buildings and empty lots, put it that way, improved and unimproved properties. For some reason, this latest law seems to only refer to buildings. And what I suggested is that this may just be a drafting error. I'm not, because they are intended to be amendments to existing legislation. So I think we're just going to have to seek clarification of that. With regard to the classification of vacant lots, most of them are currently designated as vacant and are charged the Class 3 vacant property rate, which is higher. But what I said is that only a handful are charged the Class 4 blighted rate, which is even higher. And I'm not sure why that is. And you can go on the database if you want to have a fun afternoon or evening and search through the listings, and you'll see how each of these properties are classified.
Thank you for that.
I'm going to take, yeah, Karen, before I get to you really quickly, Tanya, if you can hear me, which I think you can, I'm going to invite you to turn your camera off, because you're making us all feel guilty that we're not getting our grocery shopping done, while we watch you. Perfect. Oh, I don't know, she might be muted too. All right, Karen Gall.
I don't know why I raised my hand. Maybe it was because I wanted to go grocery shopping too. Let me lower my hand. I had no intentions of doing that. Okay, so Howard, thank you so much as always, and I've been a really big proponent of making sure that we look into the vacant to vibrant act, as well as the any of the vacant properties which is in the 1B area. So I know that you notated that there is a considerable amount of properties in the coffers of the district for that are considered vacant and either blighted, etc. What I want to know from you is, did you get the numbers? And I specifically had been asking this for quite some time. And I know we can probably query you on that through your reporting for the 1B area, specifically the commercial zoned properties that are businesses that have not been economically viable for the area. And I'm not saying, oh, they're closed down because of COVID, but particularly businesses that have been holding out, and they're not paying the highest level of property taxes because they're looking and waiting for a cash cow of some sort, I believe, is the reason why they are intentionally keeping their businesses closed. For some of them, not all of them. But have you found out specifically how many commercial businesses that we have in the 1B area that has and how many, I mean, and whether or not you know the specific amount of taxes that is due to the city from those businesses, and are they capturing those taxes from those property owners to make sure that it could, source some funding for our area, particularly. Is that a clear question for you? And do you have the research on that?
It's several clear questions,
Okay.
and we don't throughout, not only for our ANC but for the entire city, we don't really know what the causes are. We may know for individual cases, but in general, we don't have a systematic understanding of the causes of vacancy of commercial properties. And in one of our resolutions, we listed that as a topic that for further research that the city should undertake. It's important that the city continue to do research in order to answer the exact kinds of questions that you raised. So no, I don't have specific answers for your questions. Some of them perhaps could be figured out by putting together different pieces of data. That's a lot of work though. And I think that's something that the city will need to invest in. In the most recent act that was passed, it does call for further research to continue, and we can push the district to actually do that and offer some specific research questions for them to look at.
And my secondary question is, I mean, I know that was a little cluster right there, but the second question in regards to this, um, it's, and as being a proponent of making sure that the most vulnerable citizens and those citizens in the area who've had a lot of challenges because of probate, neglect of property, because of ailments, etc. Um, I'm curious as to, are they going to be, and I heard you said that there's specific provisions where they will be able to, if they keep their property up. That was that specific clause I heard you say. If they're unable to do it, are they going to suffer penalties, especially being the vulnerable population that has been impacted economically by, because they're in those situations?
Well, if funded, this bill would provide uh, loan credit and tax, I believe tax credits for people who need to repair their homes. DC already had a program of grants for home rehabilitation, but it was only for certain types of rehabilitation. And what the amendment here does is broaden the range of rehabilitation and repairs that grants can support. But of course, people will have to apply for them.
Right.
They'll have to know about them and they'll have to apply for them. And so I think that's another challenge that I should have mentioned is how do we get the word out to people about these various provisions and what will become available to them. Of course, all these things will have to be funded. That may be the first thing to address. Also, there are provisions in here for payment plans. If people are not able to pay the full amount of property tax that's due, they can set up a payment plan to spread it out over time. I think there are provisions for people with limited resources, as you're talking about.
Well, there is a lot of different, and it's not necessarily in Washington, D.C., but in other areas when people who are in these economic crises that we're referring to, they tend to become prey for cities to come and take their properties, whether it's like maintenance of their grass area or whatever, then immediately, there's a vulture type behavior that happens to these particular homeowners. And I just one monitoring of this particular group of people that we're referring to. I just want to know what mechanisms are in place in this particular act or has been discussed, to sort of protect this very vulnerable population, and then also just to make sure that there's no additional predatory situations that can incur on their properties because of their conditions. That's that's my end of my questions, but I just want to know if that was part of the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, I think ANCs have a role in that. If people feel like the predators are after them, an ANC may be a place they can go for some help and support on that. But yeah, that's always going to be an issue. I think there are mechanisms in this law to protect owners, but as I said, people are going to have to know about it, and institutionally in DC, there will have to be some, supports and implementation of those mechanisms. So there's a lot to be done. Just because we have an act doesn't mean a law doesn't mean things are all rosy now. There's a
Right.
lot more to be done.
I
Good.
appreciate it. Thank you. I mean, and those were the things that I had initially brought forward before, and I just want to make sure that that's part of the core questioning when you're sitting in and representing, if you can ask those type of questions or
I will.
spark that conversation. Thank you so much, Howard.
I will. Thanks, Karen.
Great. Great. All right. Howard, thank you. I've got a million questions, but given time, what I'm going to do is ask if we can put this back on the agenda again for September,
Sure.
with maybe a focus on the role the ANC can play, especially as funding and additional resources from the district are still in flux. Cool. Thank you again. We're going to move now to the bid update, and I'm going to promote Michael McCarthy from Quadrangle to a panelist so that he is able to hop on and participate more fully. This group has met Michael a couple of times before. He and his colleague Michael Wagner both attended our Economic Development Committee meeting in February, where we had a robust Q&A on the Neighborhood Management Authority. They came and led the discussion in March on the Business Improvement District. They have been working very hard behind the scenes and have started to meet with a number of the small business owners along the corridor as they advance this work. The one thing that I want to maybe clarify as I hand this over to Michael is that a big part of their behind the scenes work has been with David Meny and with Councilmember Nadeau's office, also with Councilmember Pinto's office. And so there are two, big updates that I think are worth commenting on because they are so foundational to the discussion we're about to have. The first is that in working with Councilmember Pinto's office, the bid organizing group has agreed that the orientation of the Business Improvement District map would be, as we had supported a couple of months ago, east to west, running along the U Street corridor itself. And then the second big update in their ongoing work is that Councilmember Nadeau has indicated that she would support and sponsor the bill that would form a bid on U Street, which I think is her acknowledging both her continued desire to have more resources and more structure put along U Street, and also a nod to the good work that has been going on the part of the bid group. And so what I'd like to do is to turn this over to Michael so that he can take us through an update on where they are, where they're going, have an opportunity for this group to ask questions. There's a lot of work being done, having been done, a lot more work that will be done. We're certainly welcome to have Michael back again in September, but we definitely wanted to make sure we had a chance to hear where they're at today and ask him questions. So Michael, floor is yours.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. And thanks to all of you, committee members and attendees alike for, sharing is not turned on. Could I impose on whoever is the lead to turn on sharing?
That is me. So give me 1 second. So sorry, you're not able to share?
No, sharing, send request. So here's my request for sharing. Request has been sent.
Allowed.
So I can go ahead. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just give you a little bit of an overview of share. Oh, there we go. Okay. Can you all see that?
We can. Yep. Thanks.
Is there? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So what I thought I'd go over, and I appreciate and would welcome you all directing this conversation. For many of you, some of this is history. I mean, you know it well, and I apologize if I'm being redundant along those lines. So as far as the background information, I'll go rather quickly, but I'm happy to come back and speak on any issue that you might be going unanswered. So I thought I'd just a quick overview, kind of what is it? I don't know if anybody on this call doesn't know, but let's, for the benefit of everybody, I'll just do a quick minute there. The bid timeline, where we are in the process and what we need to complete before standing up this organization or in an effort to stand up this legislation, and where we stand with the legislation. And most importantly for us, and it's been the single greatest challenge heretofore, is a communication plan. So we've engaged an organization by the name of Brick and Story to assist in that effort. And then we can talk about what I think is probably most interest to people, and that is, well, what's the benefit? So having said that, I'll leave this up and just do a quick, basically, an overview. The bid is basically just a defined geographic area in which local businesses and property owners agree to tax themselves. Uh, and the goal is these funds are used to develop, manage, and promote the district to improve the economic and the physical environment in the area. So it's all about business support and a component of all of our cohorts, and our cohorts include homeless. And so it's really kind of understanding all of our various cohorts in this geographic area, and then setting up a structure to help support them. It's governed by a nonprofit organization that's made up of typically an executive committee and property owners, business owners, religious leaders in the community, residents in the community. It really is to be a representative board, and that's absolutely the goal. The benefit of a bid, or the one thing about a bid that as a businessman I appreciate, you're only chartered for 5 years. You all have to be constantly proving your worth if you expect to be recertified when you go back to apply for your recertification in 4 years. So you have basically a 4-year runway to kind of show a meaningful contribution to the community, or you just wouldn't get recertified. So where we are on the timeline, this is a process, and for those of you who might be new to the discussion, I personally apologize. Again, we've been trying our best to get the message to the street. We began about 2 years ago in mid-2023, and then in December 2023, we put together a group of a steering committee, and the steering committee consists of 9 people, local business owners, property owners, etc. And at that time, we turned to the steering committee, and the steering committee members graciously funded $90,000 for us to conduct a kind of a feasibility period, a feasibility study, and to ensure a bid would be viable. And that's a key kind of threshold, and as well as kind of the foundational work needed to launch the bid. So we started with a business plan. Simply, and this is a bit of the business plan is consistently a bit of a circular reference. So in that, the business plan is how big does a bid need to be before it can really be kind of really making a significant contribution to the community. And fortunately, we do have a case study to benchmark ourselves against in the Shaw effort, and that is DuPont Circle, where similar profile, similar staffing model, similar services, completely different neighborhood, completely different cohorts. Don't get me wrong. You don't replicate a bid. It's a bid response to the needs of the community. We originally started out on a north-south orientation, and as Matt mentioned earlier on, and it became a little bit of a political issue. Although both council members, Bria Nadeau and Brooke Pinto, were very, very supportive. Ultimately, we did. You have to look at the viability, the financial viability. So we were able to, on the business plan, say if we could generate about $1.2 million in revenues out of base bid tax alone, you can have a small clean team. We have 7 on that clean team in DuPont Circle. So that's 7 people who we employ on the streets just to create a cleaner, friendlier environment. And then typically it's two staff members in the office because, again, the money's not to go to overheads, to go back into the community. So the boundary map, which I think all of you have seen, but I will share it again here. And sorry about this, guys. Okay. So this is the boundary map that, as I said, we modified, and there are some final edits that will be done to this. But every time we make a change, you've got to go back and recalculate your tax base and reevaluate your service area. The one thing I will tell you, the only area that does remain a question is kind of this block on U Street or 14th Street. I'm sorry, on 14th Street. to know whether or not we have the support of the local businesses to extend that far down. Otherwise, it would simply stop at T Street. Um, so so that's where we are. And again, every time we kind of make an adjustment like that, we have to go back to our business model again, go back to the tax map, see how would that impacted our revenue. You'll notice we did not go down farther, and this is Councilmember Nadeau was very helpful with us. Um, she would have preferred that we took this all the way over to Florida to Columbia Road. There's nothing between, and there's no tax revenue generated west of 16th Street. So we got to be we've got to be prudent, financially prudent. We can't take on responsibilities without offsetting revenues to help cover the cost of providing the service. So that's where we are on that's where the map stands today. It does go south down to Rhode Island Avenue and captures the library. Um, so that's where we are with the map. Bear with me here 1 second ago. So we did put together, we have a team together that we engaged and have hired, and that was Rich Bradley, who is the ultimate spokesperson on all things bids. He was the founding executive of the downtown bid, which actually served currently as chairman of the board of and have for the past 6 or 7 years. With revenues kind of $19 million. So, and it's nice because the bid community is a very collaborative community. We don't need to have everything ourselves, so long as we can access it through other bids. And they're very, very good about that. So it's Rich Bradley, John Stover Associates, who's helped us with their business plan and the map itself. And again, the map itself is not a geographic decision; it's an economic decision. And then David Goldblatt, who is key to all things housing and DC. He's a real leading authority in the field. And lastly, as I mentioned, Brick and Story for our communications consultant, and they have only just been engaged. So our goal is to target a launch in the first quarter of 2026, basically effectively qualifying for a check from OTR for the first tax cycle of the year. So the tax would be, we basically then come into, based on our preliminary numbers, you start out with about $600,000 to stand that up. Our deal with the, so that's basically where we are on the timeline. Right now, the next big carry from our steering committee members and those that have already engaged with us. We have to conduct a petition process so that we're acting on the community's wishes. And that requires us to have 50% of the assessed value within the geographic area and 25% of all property owners within the assessed area. So, that petition process is a fairly heavy lift, and that's what we're getting ready for next. Coincidental with the petition process will be David Goldblatt completing the application and the necessary documentation to file for a bid. Fortunately, a lot of that is a bit formulaic, meaning the documentation itself to request the legislation to charter the bid. So the one thing I will go back to, though, is the business plan, because again, this continues to be updated, and it's a business plan that has to be filed with the DSLBD. They're pretty clear about what the rules are, but obviously we have to have at that time draft bylaws, annual operating budget for not only for 1 year, but for we have to have a 1 year and a 5 year budget for them. So all of this is work that we've been having to do behind the scenes, just as we continue to prove out the viability. I certainly think at this juncture, we know we can do this. I know there have been efforts in the past. And again, that also comes from just knowing how many parcels and assessed value our steering committee members bring to the table. The one thing I will say is, the business plan, and this is a key issue, the business plan is only built on bid tax revenue. That's only scratches the surface. And I can say this, I'm also treasurer of the DuPont Circle bid. I don't have a thing about bids. It's just my way to give back to the community. I don't get the the social benefit that you all enjoy from your positions. And I really mean that. So this is my way. I'm a native Washingtonian. I grew up in the city. I live in the city still. I mean, this is my hometown. So this is really my way. I think that really, how do we make our community better? So, anyway, it, right now, the steering committee, which again is business owners, property owners, it's not as representative as ultimately we want the board to be. So you have a smaller group that will actually help to govern the daily operations of the organization. That's probably, it's an odd number, so it's either 7 or 9. And then you have the board, and that's, everybody still answers to the board, the bigger board. And that board can be, we need to refine the numbers. You don't want it unwieldy, but you want there to be enough room for everybody at the table. And that's very important. So as I mentioned, the communication plan is increasingly important in this effort, because never have I seen so many cohorts that we need to be considerate of, and we need to engage. As I say, yes, it's the businesses and it's the property owners, but it's the homeless. There's the religious groups in the neighborhood, the not-for-profits in the neighborhood, the educational institutions in the neighborhood, churches. I said religious, but nonetheless, even if they're not paying taxes like the churches, they have a seat at the table. We want them there. So at that job, it really brings us more on to now, what are the kind of the key benefits? The biggest functions, the bid mission for every bid is a tagline: clean, safe, and friendly. And that's what we're trying to make our community. And that's, the standards are fairly basic. So I'll take for granted, if you take as accepted, we have the guys in the street. That's just a daily function. That's nothing special about that. That's just making sure our neighborhood is as clean as we can keep it, and supporting DPW in that effort. It really is more about coordination. And that's the one thing in the downtown bid and the DuPont bid, it's incredibly challenging. Not only do we ourselves have an enormous number of organizations within this area, I was looking back, I was like, this coordination issue. We have, just by way of example, 5 ANCs and 14 single member districts that we need to coordinate with, within these bid boundaries. So coordination is a key component, but that coordination, which Karen is actually really excellent at, is that interagency coordination, which is DDOT, DPW, MPD, DSLBD. We go on and on and on. And I think Karen has done a great job in making sure all of those people are at the table and are aware of what's going on in our community. And I congratulate her for that effort. But then we have all of these groups that we need to help coordinate: the U Street Business Council, the T Street Task Force, the number of forgive me, just organizing with the other Main Street programs, and that's a very important partnership. A bid does not replace a Main Street. In DuPont, we have both the bid and the Main Street, but they're chartered differently. So one of the things I talk about the coordination, part of that coordination is just having a table that you can receive public funds, having a venue that you receive public funds. So Brooke Pinto earmarked $650,000. Many of you have heard me say this time and time again. Last year for Shaw, and we couldn't take it because there was no one to take it. When we met with Deputy Mayor Pia, she made it clear. She said, we've resources that we've wanted to invest in Shaw, and we have nobody who can execute it for us. Nobody can receive and execute. Main Streets, they are very important. They make a very important contribution to the city and to Shaw, and it's not redundant. Our job is effectively to help support the Main Street efforts. Maybe that's taking things off of their plate that would allow them to redeploy their resources. You don't know what that is, because they need to help us understand what that might be that would help them. So that's a key component. A lot of the others, some of the things, and I'll mention specific things that we do at DuPont, because it's similar size, so similar resources, and therefore similar expenses. But one of the things we do is we retain a business consultant who works with all of the local businesses on grant writing, and I'm not saying she's writing their grants for them, but it's a resource: grant writing, business licenses, clean hand certificates, working with the city if they have an issue with any of the above, because then they can tap the resources of the bid to try to help solve some of these problems. So she does, her sole purpose, she doesn't do anything else other than engagement in the local community. She presented to us this morning, and the changes that she has made, for some, it's helping them understand kind of their businesses is bad. So she'll go in and do look at all the reviews. And she said the answers are usually in Yelp and Google reviews, which seems so basic. But she said, I can help them. Then I can help them fix their social media. I can help them. So it really is, especially during these times. Matt kicked it off in the beginning. Restaurant week and our foot traffic is down so low. It's not even funny. So we need to be doing what we can to support our local businesses. And I think that that's a critically important component. So I think that is just a general overview. The other piece I will mention as well, but pretty much every bid has, and that is a partnership. I know there are existing operations, there's existing efforts now as well, but we engage with H3 project, both at the downtown bid and the DuPont bid. And basically, it's get to know your homeless, identifying who these people are, how we can help them. In the downtown bid, we bought an airline ticket to send a guy to Paris to reunite with his sister. $1,000, but he got a home out of it. So, I mean, those are the kind of things that we know who the people are, we know what their needs are. We don't just need to push them out. We help them, and we can help them, and that's our response to those. Of much has been given, much is expected. We need to help these people. And so there are ways that you can, and it leaves the population that's more unmanageable. It reduces its size. So with that, I can talk.
Yeah.
For.
Let's do this. We've got a hand up. This is great, Michael. Thank you. We've got a hand up. We probably have other questions. We'll start with the committee members, then we'll go to the community. I see a couple of familiar business names on, so where they've got questions, we'll turn to them too. Krishna, why don't you start us off with the Q&A?
Okay, Michael, first, thanks for that overview. I thought it was really helpful to be referencing, the DuPont bid as a benchmark because, similar size gives us a sense of what sort of our expectations are as a community. We sometimes think of the bid and we all think of the downtown bid, but that's obviously on a very different scale. So I thought that was a really great point that you were making. I guess I'm just a little confused here, and let me try to put this in two ways, and I hope you can see where I'm trying to go with this. You had mentioned about how you're going to have to work with the Main Streets and other groups, that a lot of this is a coordination job, and that's very understandable. What I'm a little confused by is, from my understanding, the Main Streets right now are getting grants from DSLB to run some of the clean teams along U Street. Those clean teams are restricted to commercial areas only. The biggest problem we probably have in this area is that the trash is being pushed out a block onto either side of U Street, up to T, up to V, and that those blocks need to get cleaned, even though they're not necessarily being cleaned by the existing DSLB grants being run by the Main Street. So what's your thoughts about how you're going to work with those grants and try to get those areas cleaned?
Yeah, we don't, they our providing a service does not void their grant. So more resources, that's what we want. So that's why I say Main Street is absolutely a very should be a very collaborative relationship. So I think, especially working with Alex at the Shaw Main Street. But again, the charters are the Main Street program couldn't accept like money from the city under the Safe Quarters grant, because you have to spend the money and then request reimbursement. They don't have that kind of cash. They don't have sufficient cash flow to do that. As for providing services, this is just where it's a business plan. We can provide services wherever the resources will allow us to provide services, but we can't give away services. there has to be some a cost, some way to pay for those expanded services and the additional people we would need to provide that coverage. So we have to be careful about making promises we can't fulfill. I mentioned we did this bid on bid tax alone. What I didn't talk about is there are so many other funding mechanisms. With each of the bids that we run, there's always a foundation. So a Duke District foundation underneath the bid. And the sole purpose of the foundation is to support the mission of the bid, but it allows you to accept tax-free contributions. Game changer. The other is voluntary contributions. And actually, we're in discussions now with Howard on a voluntary contribution. So the idea is we will raise the money that we are able to raise, but there has to be some, and by way of example, Brooke wanted us to take the Shaw bid down to Massachusetts Avenue. I adore Brooke Bento and would have done anything in my power to make her dream come true. It wasn't possible because we're covering blocks where there's no revenue and we're providing services. Doesn't work. You can't, you have to be able to balance the revenue against the expenses, So I don't know that that's a great answer, but basically what I'm saying is, no, I understand that we don't know. We don't want to push the trash anywhere. And I think that that's probably one of the big issues in every bid is the trash pickup. And I mean, at DuPont, we're like 2,000 pounds a month that we pick up. And that's not what DPW picks up. That's what the bid picks up. So, I mean, that's always part of the challenge, though, and just making sure we're staying on top of basic services. It's still DPW's responsibility, but we know how they're doing. We can give them a grade, and it's not very good grade. So we're intended to just augment what they're doing.
And Michael, I think I heard you say this in one of your prior presentations, that what you have often found is that when you are able to put the right amount of resources into keeping the main commercial corridor clean, it dramatically reduces the amount of spillover that happens into the residential areas around the commercial corridor.
There was a very interesting comment made from the last commander and the commander before him, Boatler and then
Pulliam.
And they basically said, there is an unwelcome element, and I'm talking about drug trade, for example. There's an unwelcome element. The one thing that disrupts them more than anything is a clean environment. They like to be in the shadows. They like to be in the dark. He's like, cleaning up the street makes them feel more uncomfortable. And then, it's about that. And so, Matt, thank you for that lead. And it's very, very true. So I do think there's an element of that, and that is, it's just not the place for a open air heroin market, in front of a beautiful new building.
Frank, I see your hand up, and then I also see a question just popping up from the audience.
And Frank has been, for me, a great resource, and a resource. I have to tell you that.
Thank you, Michael. Good to see you. Thank you for your presentation. I tell people in my neighborhood that we're 80% there, and we're in the best position we've been in at least 10 years, if not 20 years. So thank you, Quadrangle, and for you personally for all your work. I would like to, you made a comment just a few moments ago in response to Krishna regarding the Duke Foundation. Are you relaying some new information here? Did you mean the Duke District?
No, well, I'm sorry. So we have the Downtown Business Improvement District, and then I have the Downtown Business Improvement District Foundation. It's just a tax structure so that we can take contributions tax-free. So, so it's a tax-free, it's easier to raise money through the foundation than it is through the.
I see. So then is this then the Duke District bid, or is this the U Street bid?
No, well, I'm sorry, I'm using the terms interchangeably. I don't, and this is something that we've actually talked to Matt about because branding matters. And we haven't really worked on branding. So I'm sorry, my efforts, it was the Shaw bid. And then it was, well, expanding us more than the Shaw bid. So its question is the Shaw bid limit us? Are we better to refer to something as a Duke? You guys are going to be able to advise us on that better
Well,
than I would.
I do have to say this, that I probably speak for some other folks on this call, but I think the Shaw bid is dead with the north to south leg.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
no question.
yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah.
yes.
Well, just even using that name because U Street, as I've learned just recently, I used to call where I live North Shaw, but I've gotten off that horse, and I believe U Street has a greater parlay, a greater name, a long history. Whereas Shaw is really from 1954, 1960 rehab project based on a school. So it's interesting to hear where U Street has a century and more of history, of course. Um, so my last related question, and I asked your colleague, Mr. Wagner, this last time, but I know you will have the best information, and I don't know what you can share publicly. Perhaps this is not a public conversation, but is there some reprieve from a concomitant is there a commitment to relieving the bid and its efforts so we don't aren't distracted from a Duke district municipality that this committee's been working under,
Oh, I'm
discussing.
thrilled. Thank you. Thank you. I'm well, I from the time of age of 13 years old, I was walking through Shaw. So, but I'm a new entrant. I mean, we have we're building, to the chagrin of some. We've just delivered 250 units on 7th Street, and we have 400 more up on Georgia Avenue. And we, as a property owner, are never interested in double taxation. So if there was, and frankly, that was what made it so easy in working with Brianne. It's like, no, I'm not I don't need to fight you. You're not my enemy. But I will tell you that if something like an NMA is launched, that we will have the prerogative to collapse the bid. So that would be same kind of vote, same kind of process that we are setting it up. In other words, we don't want to have two duplications and double taxation on the property owners. Property owners are already being overly taxed along U Street.
Thank you for that.
So yeah, so I appreciate it. I thank you for that setup. I really do. That was a very important. And to your other point, I have never been so I've never had such an incredible opportunity, and that is to have you guys have a brand that people would kill for, just kill for. It's not about changing it. It's about leveraging it. It's about celebrating the brand, celebrating kind of all the good that's there. And there's lots of it. So I've never had like downtown, there's no brand downtown. I mean, there's a little bit more of a brand in DuPont, but U Street, that's a different animal. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. So I mean, doing things like going to some of these, the larger corporate users, they're dying to show an investment in the local community. Fine, help us in Shaw. Yeah. You want to take a grassroots approach, help us here.
Yeah. One quick comment maybe on that, and then I want to raise and answer one of the questions that was asked in the community, and then Tanya, I see your hand raised. We'll go to you. One of the things, and Frank, you kind of hit on it, the question of U Street versus Duke District, still being kind of batted around what the right nomenclature is going to be, and there will be more conversations about that. I will say one of the big losses for me is that around, I think it was 2004, and many of you probably know the date better than I. There was a Washington, D.C. Jazz Fest that was created. It was kind of started along the U Street corridor. It involved the Lincoln Theater. It really tapped into, how important the whole U Street area was as a birthplace of American jazz. And that event is now hosted at the Wharf, right? I mean, it's one of those things where we have not had the organization along U Street to be able to hold on to some of these things that really define this area and that we get to celebrate. It got moved off to a brighter, shinier, newer, frankly, more expensive venue. It used to be a free event on U Street, and now it's I looked at tickets the other day, a very expensive event. And so I'm hopeful that regardless of what the name of the bid is, that the organization of Michael and his team and the bid effort, bringing together the businesses, our residential community, the ANC, and this committee, that we're able to put both a little bit of shine back on U Street and also really double down on the things that make U Street important, which means bringing some things back that we're missing. A member of the community asked the question, what did happen to the NMA? I'll answer that maybe in three short bullets. The first is that it is still sitting out there. It was referred by the chairman to two different committees who have not yet been able to review it. So it's still sitting out there. Secondly, the council member, as she has learned more about the bid and been involved in those discussions, has essentially said, look, if you're able to get the bid up and running, then that's what I'll put my support behind. And then the third is that the feedback that I heard, at least from the community in September and March, when we were talking about both the bid and the NMA, the community seemed to be far more positive on the bid structure. And I think the comments that were made from the community was, look, we've been asking the District of Columbia for a long time to make some investments, and we'd like to try a different approach, right? Let's see if the bid approach, which is a proven model and has worked well elsewhere, can work. So that's kind of the short kind of narrative on where we're at. But please, if that did not answer your question, raise that question again. Another question that just came from the audience, but I'm going to turn to Tanya, who had her hand up. Tanya, go ahead.
Good evening. I wanted to know if you think that what is happening politically in the district is going to have any impact on this effort and moving forward. And yes, take it back. Everything that got taken away from us, let's bring it right back here to U Street where it belongs. So support that.
Great question, Tanya. No, I think what's going on politically has a great impact on us all now. As I said, for example, this is a big discussion point. I had a board meeting yesterday with Downtown and today with DuPont. There's no traffic to the restaurants, and it's restaurant week. Traffic is down. So all of them. So I will say it doesn't have a direct impact on the launch of the bid. It does have an impact on kind of what the bid does, and that is we just need to do a better job. I keep using right proper as my example. So help me God, I want to help them keep that business open and operating right where it sits now. And I think they're suffering. So it won't adversely impact our launch, if you will.
Thank you.
Great. Another question from the community. Fully appreciate this. If we did bring Jazz Fest back to U Street, where the heck would people park? It's a good question. I think it speaks a lot to the kind of a longer term goal for U Street, right? Where you say, if you've got a series of big shows at Lincoln Theater, where do people go for dinner before or after? We've got hundreds of liquor licenses up and down U Street, and only 34 of them are restaurants. And to Michael's point, right, people are not going out to restaurants right now, which I'm hoping is just a short-term thing. We're going to have bigger conversations about what we're trying to do, and what resources and infrastructure is required to support those things. But I like the idea of us starting to have conversations about where do we want to go and what do we want it to be, and who can we engage and pull in, and then start solving some of these logistical questions that have to get solved. And again, if you go back and you look at the wharf has a giant underground, again, incredibly expensive parking facility, that they were able to build out brand new. I'm going to go off script here for just a second and say, to me, there's kind of this existential question slash crisis that I'm wrestling with as I think about economic development in U Street. And that is when we do brand new built environments that are often supported with tax breaks and other incentives, they are able to build kind of a brand new neighborhood that tends to kind of have some success built into it, and it takes some energy, and it takes some people, and it takes some economy away from the established neighborhoods. And so the existential question that I tend to grapple with is, can an established neighborhood in the District of Columbia compete? Right? Can U Street be a place that we get people to come to and celebrate? And I think that's going to mean that we got to spend some time talking about what U Street was and what U Street is and what U Street can be, honoring, right, all three of those chapters at the same time. So I think this is a great conversation. I think that the bid structure is going to be an incredibly helpful partner in all of that, an incredibly helpful leader in all of that. And I think one of the things that I continue to hear from Michael is a really strong desire to work not only in partnership with the local and small businesses in U Street, but also members of the community who know, right, the history and know the people. Speaking of one of those people who knows the history and the people, Karen Gall, your hand is up.
I mean, our history is happening right now out on 14th and U. If everybody is unaware of it, I'm right here in the thick of things. Um, we have a nice big old celebration slash protest going on. But beyond that, I am asking about our wonderful community and how it would benefit the tenants and that live here. And I put both of my questions in the chat, and I'll read that off so in case anyone hasn't seen it. How will bid services extend beyond commercial corridors to benefit residential blocks where tenants live? Okay. And the second question, Michael, is how will tenants and homeowners have meaningful representation on the bid board, not just property owners and businesses? And I know you've heard me ask this series of questions before, and I just want to make sure that it stays a part of the conversation.
Sure.
It's not just to bids. I asked this about the NMA as well. It's really important that we have representation, um, and and it needs to be real clear. So I do like what you presented because I'm all about clean teams, and I'm the one who has been pushing that if we don't have a clean city, you public safety, you learn that by cleaning it and keeping a healthy city, and it has to be attached to public safety. If it's nasty, nasty things happen. If it looks bad, bad things happen. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and it's overly stressed through our 3D third district police district in regards to that. So thanks for bringing that up.
No,
But I
that's
really
your
want to
questions.
know how it
Yeah,
all.
both your questions are great questions. And
Yes.
bids are not all things to all people. I do have to say they have their limitations. It is part of it is how bid law is structured, where single property owners are exempt from participations in bids, so they don't have to pay. That's why really bids predominantly deal with commercial corridors. And now, having said that, then there obviously are, for like the downtown bid, it's 144 blocks. It's not a corridor. But what we end up doing then is things like using money from the Safe Corridors grant to provide enhanced cleaning down by the Capital One Arena so that the sports teams would stay, and increase security so that the sport team would stay. So the residential property owners are going to benefit, but it's going to be a tangential benefit. It's the property owners are agreeing to tax themselves to improve services on the commercial corridor. And the idea is all boats rise with the tide. Now, as far as representation, at every one of our bids, we've got residents on our boards. Finding residents who actually are interested in being actively engaged, we don't want joiners. The last thing I'm interested in is having a board of joiners. You don't get anything done. So it's, but on both bids, it was like downtown, it was important. We had residents from city center. What's that experience like living in the, I wouldn't want to live there. I don't mind shopping there, but I wouldn't want to live there. So what's that experience like? So the residential input is actually critically important.
Okay, yeah, because the important part that I'm referring to mainly is because this is a highly, it's a really, it's a densely, there's, we have lots, everything, we have multifamily and we have the single family residents. And bids tend to bring up our property values around here. And we do know that it's a benefit, but for those who don't have real input in receiving the benefits, because you'll, the trash pushing question that Krishna brought up was really important because they'll clean just enough and then the rest of the residential areas that really needs that attention, that all the businesses are pushing that energy towards those areas, they're never part of
A bid
this.
doesn't clean just enough. A bid cleans its boundaries. A bid cleans its area. It's not. I will say we've got 84 SAMs at the downtown bid. It's a lot of people to make sure that we're cleaning that area. We are not extending outside the bid boundary. We don't provide services outside the bid boundary. Where do we stop? How do I tell property owners who are taxing themselves? And this is to provide services for neighborhoods that are not in the bid and don't want to participate or don't have to participate and don't want any, they're not making any contribution, but they're wanting service. You're creating a situation where you're setting something to fail, where if you're providing services beyond the scope of what the revenues allow, it's not going to work.
Let's do this because I want to make sure that we're able to let Michael go. We've got two questions in the audience. Karen, one of the things that I want to say is maybe two responses. One is we're going to have Michael back, right, to talk more about governance. The other thing I want to highlight is that the bid is focused on the business areas primarily. I would encourage residents, tenants, owners, any category to be pushing on their ANCs also, right? When I think about the amount of time, I have DPW over here for a clean walk, probably every 4 months, every 3 months. And we put a lot of energy into making sure that the resources are getting put in, that we're getting the services that we need. And so there's a lot of advocacy that happens here. I would say reach out to and leverage the ANC as well, who is supposed to be advocating on behalf of the residents. And my hope, frankly, is that the load gets a little bit lighter in some areas because the bid's stepping in with resources, and that the ANC and related folks are able to kind of help out more. Scott Pomeroy, you are allowed to speak if you unmute. You see your hand raised. And then there's one other person with a 202 number who I will call on next, and then we'll let Michael go.
Yeah, I was just put a comments in the Q&A about the jazz events that were held on U Street. They were part of the Jazz Appreciation Month celebration in the month of April. That was a national event that the Smithsonian did, that the Main Street program, the original one, produced for 3 years in a row. The big difference there was the Jazz Fest did start there with Charlie Fishman as he was first creating the idea for what to do with the Jazz Fest. He was one of the producers of the concert that we held on Duke Ellington's birthday there at the Lincoln Theater at the end of April. But it wasn't a permanent part of what we were doing there on U Street. There, we knew we had limited space for doing things, but what we had was a rich number of venues that were showcasing jazz on a regular basis. And so we were able to just showcase all of those venues and really highlight them through that month. And so Mayor Williams de declared Jazz Appreciation Month as one of the highlights of the Main Street programs that were going on at the time. And so it was just started there, but it was never, Jazz Fest was never owned by U Street entirely, though we tried to keep it as much, because Charlie's idea was to continue that whole concept of highlighting jazz in multiple venues around the city. And
Great.
that was done throughout the time that he was running Jazz Fest. It was never just one place that showcased jazz. It was multiple venues.
That's great. Scott, thank you for that. Really appreciate the background. I will definitely be reaching out to you because I'm curious about learning more and curious about what we can do. Thank you so much. 202 number, if you can just introduce yourself and then ask your question, and then we'll let Michael go. 202 number, you're going to have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yeah.
Oh, hey. Hi. This is Chris Otten, Adams Morgan friend. I got really familiar with the Adams Morgan bid, and you can look this up. You can Google it. They were charged with racism because of which businesses they held the hands of versus others. I just want to put that out there because, if we're going to contend with racial equity, these bids are problematic. Okay, so it's just something to put a little bit of a lens on. But what I wanted to clarify with Michael.
Can I ask you to clarify that comment as bids being problematic?
You can go look it up.
No. I'm curious about how they're. I want to
Google Adams Morgan bid and racism, and you'll find it. I think the Washington City paper covered it.
Yeah.
But to that end, because I worked with some of the businesses that didn't feel like they were getting helped in Adams Morgan along the 18th Street corridor and the Columbia Road corridor by the bid. One thing that I keep hearing you, Michael, say is these property owners are willing to take on the tax. Now, and this probably deserves a bigger conversation about the realities of that, because just like property taxes, the bid taxes are passed along to the businesses. So it's not the property owner, if I'm not mistaken, at least how it works in Adams Morgan, it's not the property owner paying the property tax or the bid tax, it's the small businesses that are. And so it heightens costs. So what we see like Twins, think about Twins Lounge for a second. You want to talk about Heart of Jazz. Twins Lounge on U Street, no longer there. It was there for a very long time. They couldn't handle the costs. Well, what was the cost going up? That time it was property taxes. The property tax bill, when your property values go up, the property tax bill goes up, that gets passed on to the small business. And in many cases, surprisingly, because nobody's telling the small business when the appraiser comes around that suddenly the property owner is going to pass that bill along to them. That's not in their pro forma usually, their 5-10 year pro forma. So it just becomes an issue when I hear things like these property owners are willingly to take on these taxes, they pass them along. So maybe you could correct me wrong on that.
Actually, I agree with you 100%. And that's why I constantly said when we started this, it's businesses and property owners. One doesn't pay and the other doesn't. As you said, property owners are paying and businesses are paying. So that's why I make sure to reference them both for just the reason you identified. Real estate taxes, property taxes are passed through to tenants. There's absolutely no question. That's why it's the cost benefit analysis. We don't get recharged unless we create a better environment for the businesses that are in place.
And Chris, we've been pulling together the business owners, not the property owners, the business owners, to talk with Michael and others about this. And there have been some very candid questions and concerns raised, and Michael nailed it. The question that the business owners are asking is, what is the additional cost that I'm going to have to bear? And is there / what is the benefit to my business? And it's one of the reasons why all of these signatures and petitions have, are there, and why they've got certain requirements that they need to hit. But
I
let's
might
do this.
also, the only other comment I might say is, as for the other issue that you raised, there's no excuse for that anywhere under any circumstances in any. And yes, racial equality is a huge issue for us in this neighborhood, and it's going to have to be part and parcel to the mission of the pit.
Let's do this. We're going to keep having this conversation, Chris. You've got you've got a connection to all of us, so thank you for your question. All right, Michael, I'm going to let you go. Tanya, we're going to
thank you one and all for your time. I do appreciate it. The one thing I'd ask you to do is talk about it, and I don't mean just good stuff. I help me understand what the concerns are, just as Chris just did. We need to hear that. So let's, we're all for. We don't need just good news. We don't need happy stuff. Talk to people, and if you find that things people are concerned about, let us know so we can incorporate it into our offering.
Before Michael goes, I just want to quickly say to respond, and I said this before also when Karen raised it, and as Scott talked about that first Main Street, which I led for a short period of time, one of the things that I believe destroyed that organization at the time was the conflict between business, the advocates that wanted residents' attention addressed, as well as the businesses, because they simply could not reconcile it for the reasons that Michael talked about. And it was, as far as I'm concerned, one of the key elements why that organization does not exist today.
Good comment. Thank you. Thank you all again very much. We're open to any questions. You can channel them through Matt. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Matt has my contact information. I'd welcome taking any questions, comments, concerns you have. Thank you all.
Michael, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We are going to transition now to 1617. Our Commissioner Holden from that single member district is on. I'm going to move him to a panelist to be part of this conversation more actively. All right. So quick history, and there's no such thing as a quick history with 1617. As it relates to this particular group's conversations this term, 1617 was a topic of substantial conversation during our July meeting. We had a resolution that we reviewed as a draft. The purpose of the resolution was to request engagement from DEMPED to engage this community on the topic of the development of an RFP for that site. There had been substantial engagement by the community, and I want to maybe differentiate between engagement by the community and engagement of the community, but substantial engagement by the community in the zoning process. Dozens of hours spent, many different groups that were there representing and really pushing the zoning team to consider the impact of rezoning on the local community and the long-term residents. The commission in its prior term had written two different resolutions requesting engagement by DEMPED. And we noted in the resolution draft, and Howard Kurtzman helped with some very elegant language, noting that DEMPED had not yet been able to engage the community, and that we were making sure that this request was heard, right? There wasn't sufficient engagement of the community prior to zoning. There were multiple requests by the commission that had not yet been met in terms of engagement. And we said, we've got to get this request for engagement over to DEMPED. We referenced in that conversation the Our RFP process, which is a process that's been used multiple times by DEMPED. They'd mentioned in their May conversation with us, and it was reinforced by David Meny from the council member's office, that they were really no longer following the quote unquote Our RFP process and were baking those elements into their quote unquote standard engagement process. And so, we formed this ask of DEMPED. That resolution was the last thing that we had, importantly, was a very robust, I think, important discussion around the import of racial equity in the redevelopment of this site, the importance of racial equity and the engagement by DemPed, and how that lens would help improve the quality of the development and the outcome of development on that site. It turned into a rather lengthy resolution, but we felt that it was important to represent these various aspects of the discussion. I brought it forward to the commission at its August meeting early this month, and the commission had a very lengthy discussion on it. It was a lot of time invested, a lot of thought invested on part of the commissioners. Although this topic is new to some, it is also a topic that a number of commissioners are deeply steeped in, and so it was a pretty robust discussion. They are absolutely, the commission, committed to having a resolution asking DemPed as directly as possible for their engagement in the development of an RFP. They want the community to be involved. There was a note by the commission that it has been difficult to get DemPed's attention on engagement, and that they wanted to have as clean and as clear an ask for engagement as we possibly could. And there was a commitment to highlighting and using as a foundational element the racial equity lens that OP and other agencies within the government that are involved in planning have already committed to using as we go forward. But the commission said this particular resolution as presented to us needs some additional work, and asked me to take the resolution back to the committee for further review. I created a draft which I've circulated to the commissioners. The commissioners, a couple of folks have provided some good and useful comments on it. I had an opportunity to meet with a number of the folks that have been very involved in the 16-17 zoning hearings. We met earlier this week to talk about the objectives for engagement and the nature of that engagement, so that we are all together as a community framing up what kind of engagement we would like to see. In all of the conversations with all of the parties, this committee, the folks who have been involved in the zoning, the commissioners, there is a very clear message that no one is opposed to development. Right? This is not an effort on all of our parts. The idea of engaging DemPed in a discussion around a development RFP, this is not some surreptitious way of blocking and delaying development. This is about creating a dialogue between the government and its people on an important parcel of government-owned land, to be able to develop it in such a way that it creates broad benefit to the community, and that it also doesn't create harm to folks who have been living in and around this area for some time. And so one of the trade-offs that I made in rewriting the document, and we will get into this discussion here as we pull it up, one of the trade-offs that I made was to remove many of the historical references to the racial equity injustices or oversights that had been made, not because I don't believe that they are not important, not because I wanted to set them aside. I chose rather to put the real focus of racial equity into the engagement process itself. And the rationale for proposing this is that we wanted to keep the ask of DemPed very, very focused, right? We wanted to say this is public land, that it has the opportunity to do good, that bad decisions could do harm, and that we need you to engage with this community to talk about what the development ultimately is going to be. And so that is where we're at today, is a review of a revised document that we can kind of look at both as a community and as a commission to say, okay, what is it that we've got before us? What is it that we are going to, give me 1 second, send to the commission for their consideration? What is it that we're going to send to DEMPED? And although he's not here tonight, Patrick Nelson would remind all of us, and I'm very well aware and know that this is one of the things that I will need to do, is that I am going to have to put a fair amount of work. Members of this committee will have to put work into engaging DEMPED to make sure that we are in fact engaged by them and that we are heard. Karen, did you have a question that you wanted to start with that was broad, or did you want me to go through this draft and then you had specific comments on the draft itself that you wanted to make?
Well, okay, well, there's two things. I have placed in the chat, and I'm sure that you've seen it, is the whereas clauses that was brought forward. As you mentioned, there's been a healthy discussion with community members in order to look at what we have, and we also have the reasonings why these particular whereas clauses was chosen, the reason that they were established, and then also how it aligns with the DEMPAD opportunities. We want DEMPAD to recognize the significance of these particular whereas clauses as we go along with it. And I did not get any pushback as to taking away any of those clauses. And I know that you had pulled some of them from there, but the discussion tonight was to make sure that there's a clear reasoning rationale behind why each one of the clauses can stand as is.
But let me clarify, Karen, that is not our objective tonight. Our objective tonight is to have a resolution that is clear, but that doesn't mean that we can't discuss, right, the rationale behind the whereas clauses. But I want to clarify, the goal tonight is not to discuss each one of those whereas clauses. We can do that in the context of a resolution, but the goal here tonight is to have a very clear ask of DEMPED, and in part because if we don't get engagement by DEMPED, then the rest of this conversation isn't going to advance, right? We won't have a forum to be able to have the discussion around the racial equity lens and how it is applied to this project as we go forward. So let me just go back to where you were at. I wanted to clarify kind of intent and purpose, but also to say, we can spend time looking at and discussing those different whereas clauses. But the real objective here is to have something that goes to DEMPED that is very clear in terms of our ask for engagement.
And so that's why I started with saying each one of the ones that was suggested, I do have a very good rationale as to why it should be a part of the resolution from the alignment for DEMPAD. So if you want to bring up the document that is in the chat, and then I can go through that. If you have taken out any of those particular clauses, it I can give you the rationale on how it aligns with the DEMPAD RFP. Thank you.
Yeah, let me do this. I'm going to start by reviewing this proposal here, just so that we're all on the same page to start. Kristen, I see your hand up, so I'm going to go to you in just a moment. And that, Kristen, I'll go to you right now, and then I'll go through the document.
No, that is exactly what I was going to say. Is I think it would be helpful to just walk through the resolution, and just to clarify, this is the second version. This is what you sent the committee this morning.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was the latest version, and but the DEMPAD information that I am providing takes in consideration what you put in here this morning, but also make sure that there's full clarification on where those clauses fit in and how it aligns with DEMPAD's needs. Thank you.
Okay, let me just go through the resolution draft here, and I see that Chris is. I guess if you can just put in the Q&A, Chris, if your hand is up anew or whether it's left over from before. Krishna, if you can just look at the Q&A to see where Chris is at, that'd be great. So the first whereas is the same as we did before, simply acknowledging that that property has been identified for potential surplus designation. We note that it is the location of the third district police headquarters as well as emergency medical and fire services. This is unchanged from before, that it has received broad community attention. For those of you who have not spent time in the zoning file, 790 attachments, I think, with all sorts of different folks, including former council members writing in with positions on this. This was a big discussion. There's a cleanup around the prior ANC. I rewrote this so that it would be as clean and as concise as possible, and essentially just highlighting again that the ANC previously passed 2 resolutions requesting engagement. This right here is Howard Kurtzman's elegant language. There's not yet been any community engagement put in place by DEMPED to achieve the community engagement objectives. We're essentially saying to them, you may just not have had time yet, but acknowledging that it had not been done. We switch our language around the our RFP process, not requesting that they use the RFP process, but clarifying that they have in the past successfully, you know, provided transparency through other RFP processes and delivered public benefits through that process, and kind of highlight some of the elements about that were a part of the RFP. That the development of 1617 and 1620 would also benefit from a well-resourced, structured community engagement process. And then we do continue to make our, I think it's important note about engagement of the people who are most impacted, and advancing racial equity goals through this effort. So we say, whereas effective community engagement around the development of an RFP for 1617 U Street would help to advance racial equity goals by actively engaging long-time residents, families, and small businesses, churches, and community organizations along the U Street corridor, many of whom have historically been excluded from formal development decision making. We were essentially saying, we don't want to exclude, we don't want to leave people out. This process needs to be inclusive. And then we try to be relatively succinct with our now therefores, which is what we are requesting of DEMPED. We wish to use our great weight. There was some deliberation about the use of the term great weight. I have chosen to leave it in there to highlight that we would like DEMPED to take this ANC's request seriously, to request that DEMPED actively partner with the ANC's 1B Economic Development Committee to develop and implement a process to engage the community in a substantive 2-way discussion on the development RFP for 1617 U Street and 1620. There's a couple of things I want to unpack really quickly here. The first is we are inviting them to work with us to develop a process. They've told us that they don't use our RFP anymore. We're saying then let's work together. We are talking about a substantive engagement, and we are talking about a 2-way discussion, right? We don't want to get to a 2-hour meeting where DEMPED comes up and just presents. We're saying we want to have a 2-way discussion with you. We say, be it further resolved that the elements of this community engagement process should include. We wanted to use something that was going to be, hard to argue with, right? Something that the city itself had developed and the city had endorsed and that the city is supposed to be using. The Zoning Commission's racial equity tool. There may be a better racial equity tool out there, right? So if somebody is aware of a different, better one, but I've read through the racial equity tool that the Zoning Commission has adopted, and it asks what seem to be the questions that need to be asked for new development, any place in the city, let alone a public parcel of land. And we're asking them to use that as a guide, not the one and only, but as one guide to framing and designing the community engagement process. This seems to me to color kind of out to the corners of what they should be doing. And it creates a bit of a backstop in terms of saying, you guys have said that this is a good tool. You guys have said that this is something that should be used. You should be using it yourself. We
Matt,
also, yes,
I got a quick question. Are you referring to the Office of Planning's racial equity tool or DIMPADS?
I'm
Because
actually referring to zoning commissions.
okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, Karen, for referencing zoning commissions is that it's one that a lot of the folks who were involved in the zoning process were very familiar with, and that they wished had been used, but for a variety of reasons, OP chose not to use the zoning commission's racial equity tool. No, nobody knows why, right? OP never said this is why we chose not to use it. It just was never used during that process.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. We're asking for a community survey, and that we want the survey to help, create a keen focus on speaking to and reaching the most directly affected residents, businesses, and organizations. So, we appreciate that not everyone can come to a workshop, but we want to make sure that we're reaching out and that we are getting a lot of different perspectives. To design and host 223 structured open houses that provide a forum for two-way dialogue between DEMPED and the impacted community on topics including, but not limited to, affordable housing and the continuation of district services on the site, which would be MPD, fire and emergency services. And we tried to push a little bit further to say contract or partner with a locally rooted, community-based organization to assist in the development and facilitation of a racially equitable community engagement process. Essentially saying to DEMPED, look, if you don't feel like you've got the skill sets that you need to enter into and succeed in this kind of facilitation, let's bring somebody in, right, that is already a part of the community, already trusted, already recognized in this area, to help with this facilitation, to make sure that, again, right, we're doing justice to this process, and that folks can come out the other side and say, we have been part of this conversation, we have been heard, and that we can see how that input has, changed the development direction, to the kind of, to the outcomes that the community is seeking. And then finally, we reinforce, this is unchanged from our last one, that the ANC has no interest in slowing down the RFP development process. We'd like to begin this community engagement as soon as is possibly feasible. So this is the rewritten resolution. To Karen's point or question, where she said there were whereas clauses that were previously included, that came out of our deep discussion around racial equity, those were removed. And a big part of the reason that they were removed is for the sake of clarity and for the sake of being very, very clear with DEMPED that our primary focus is that we need you to come out here and engage with this community. And it also is rooted in a belief that if we can engage in a robust engagement process that is leveraging the racial equity tool, that leverages a community-based organization that knows how to engage in a racially equitable engagement process, that we are going to be able to achieve the going forward goals that we discussed in our last conversation on this particular resolution. So, having kind of laid this out in its pieces, we'll now kind of go to questions. I'm going to start questions and comments. I'm going to start with Krishna, whose hand is up. And Krishna, because of the way my screen is set up, I'm probably going to have to ask you to also pay a little bit more attention to hands that might be raised in the audience.
Yeah, will do. And Chris has put his hand down for now. I'm sure he will probably raise it again if he has questions.
Great.
Matt, I just want to say first, this is a great job. I mean, I don't know how many of us got the chance to listen to the full 30 minutes of the what the commission brought up, and I think this is a great response to make this resolution stronger and get it passed by the commission. The only substantive concern that I saw is if you want to just scroll down to the bottom where it says, be it further resolved, the ANC has no interest in slowing down the RFP process. and request DEMPED to initiate the community engagement process as soon as feasible. I think the language that we've been using with DEMPED is saying we would like to initiate that after the zoning process is done. I'm not after the zoning decision is finalized or released. Because I think that's what we've been saying fairly consistently with them, and I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it also helps to avoid some confusion where folks were saying, are we still waiting until after the zoning is decisions made? The answer is yes. DEMPED's actually been pretty clear on that. So good. Thank you, Krishna.
Yeah, and I mean, and just let me just do one thing. I mean, just let's keep this in context. I mean, it does sound like this is going to be a very slow development process. That it is not happening in the near future, and that what's going to realistically happen with this resolution is it's going to get dropped into a file on DEMPED, and in a year or two, someone's going to pick it up and say, "Hey, this is what the ANC wants." And that's exactly why I think the ANC was so concerned about making this as clear as possible, because it could very well be that none of us are around to explain what this resolution means, and that they're just using this as that guidance.
Yeah, Krishna, you nailed it on both fronts. This is going to take a while to get off the ground. DEMPED has said publicly that there will be absolutely no release of an RFP before calendar year 2026, and they have suggested that it is going to drag on longer than that for a variety of complicating factors, including local economy and uncertainty in the federal government. And that, yeah, we need this to be something that someone can kind of staple to the inside cover of the file so that when they pick it up, they open it up and they say, ANC 1B with its great weight has asked us to engage with the community. We got to go do this. Commissioner Holden.
Hey.
Hey.
Thanks for your work on this, Commissioner, and to the committee. I am a fan of this resolution. I think it's more succinct and clear, and I think addresses some of the concerns at the ANC meeting earlier this month, where maybe it felt like it was two resolutions in one, or it was unclear what the message that was being sent, the whereases and the resolve clauses, didn't necessarily align or mesh in people's minds. And I think this kind of neatly highlights the concerns and the whereas clauses, still mentions the importance of racial equity and taking into consideration long-standing neighbors and businesses and things like that. But then one of my key asks from a couple weeks ago was that since DEMPED has said they're not going to do the RFP, I think it behooves us to be really explicit about what engagement means to us and what we're asking for them. So if they do that, it's great and they meet what we asked. But if they don't do that, we know how they didn't meet the mark, right? So we have something to measure them against. So I think this resolution gets us to that point. So thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Holden. Frank, I see your hand and then I see Karen's.
Yes, thank you. I think it masters everything. I'll just iterate and support what Commissioner Holden just announced and what you announced, Matt, that this is a articulated, measurable vehicle here that will get the major point of requiring open community dialogue facilitated by DEMPED, which hasn't happened to date. So thank you. And I just wanted to make a side comment based on the new timeline for any development at this location. And, you mentioned two technical items. So, that the DEMPED may pick this up in 26, it might be later, and blah, 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 per DEMPED. Well, I just have to say that anybody that's on this call I would foster and ask to stay and remain a friend of this committee and its work, and so that we can advocate for the city to undertake some work on U Street, which to me, and I repeat this all the time, we've been underinvested in and underutilized and undervalued and not respected for 36 years since the arts overlay was instituted. They walked away and they went to the wharf, Union Station, Union Market, Noma, Navy Yard, and now FedEx or the Commander's Field. And guess what? You're going to have to hire another person or two and help us too. And I think that's an important point that we should keep in mind here, that they need to pay some attention to us. And regardless of what's going on the other side of town, it's time. And now's the time. And if it's this project or 14th and U Reeves Center or HFA or all three, because it's time. So I just wanted to sort of stress that point. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you, Frank. Karen.
I placed the statement for the reasoning behind making sure that the whereas clauses are in the that was presented, and I understand that some people may get tired by looking at racial equity language, or it may be lengthy for them, but it's simply asking is not asking for anything beyond what DMPAT has already committed to, and what the zoning commission's racial equity too has already requires, is simply is asking that those existing whereas clauses be added to the existing framework to be applied comprehensively to protect the U Street corridors African American community. I think that each one of them are sound. I did want to go through reading them out, but I know we're at 9 o'clock because I don't know if all of the time that was allotted for this was enough. And I think that I sat through that meeting. I didn't have to look at the tape or the YouTube video. I sat through that entire meeting and I listened to how it was explained and presented. And I do believe that presentation is really important when it comes to racial equity, and it needs to have, you use the term great weight. It needs to hold the great weight that it deserves, and it needs to use the cultural sensitivities that it deserves. And I don't think that it was given. However, I know everybody's going to do the best that they can do, and I am going to make sure that I can do the best that I can do by presenting the information that I did. And I think that it needs to hold its great weight in this document. And if it takes people a minute to read it a little bit longer, then that should be what it is. But I believe that we need to protect the U Street Quarter African American community. I think that we need to make sure that we stand on the business of protecting our citizens. Otherwise, guess what? We'll be in a terrible situation when it comes to representing the history of our U Street corridor as and trying to take things back that has gone away. And even as Frank mentioned, it's all over the place. And we need to respect what we have. And so I really would like the support of the committee to honor those particular clauses. If you want me to go through each reason why, I can, and I don't mind. I have everything all pulled out for you guys if you're ready for that. But if you want to honor and respect what was written, I would suggest you all take those clauses into consideration that I did place into the chat. Thank you very much.
Just to make sure that we are all aligned on the clauses, I think those were the ones that you had in a
Yes, sir. You can
in a
bring
Word
them up.
document.
Yes, sir. You can bring them up. I put them in the chat, and you can bring all of them up. I made sure that it was nice and neat so that you can look at them. But if you want me to go through line by line, I will explain each one of them to you, the rationale for how it works for DMPAG, as well as um, the zoning commission's racial equity tool. I have
Yeah.
everything mapped out. So just let
Give
me
me give me just 1 second, and I apologize. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. A family thing, which is now just getting taken care of. Okay, let's cover Tanya, before we dig into further, why don't you ask your question or make your comment, and then we'll
Yeah.
come back.
Unfortunately, I haven't been following this issue so as much. So can someone just tell me in a sentence or two why the clauses were taken out? I mean, I saw some emails about it generally, but what's the bottom line reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think Commissioner Holden said it well. There were, by the time we got done with the discussion last week and the rewrite of the resolution, it read and felt like there were two very different resolutions. One resolution was focusing on racial equity goals and priorities. And Karen, you will do more justice, I think, to the framing of it than I will. And the other language was focused on the ask of DemPed to engage the community. And so as the commissioners read the language, essentially what they said is, as a commissioner, I'm a little bit confused about what exactly you were asking for. They said, can you all go back and make this clearer so that we are very clear about what we are asking for? And so what one big, it's not a small change, one big change in the rewrite was to remove the whereas clauses that Karen had proposed to the group and that we had discussed on the last call that focused on racial equity. And we shifted our ask for future engagement to focus more on racial equity than we had before. Our ask before was more generic around the engagement. And so we took a lot of what I thought were the key concepts and terms from the racial equity conversation that we had had in the last meeting, and we redirected that focus into the future engagement. I think what I'm hearing from Karen is that Karen would very much like to include a number of whereas clauses that describe the racial inequity that exists or may exist on U Street. And I think that as I look at Karen's document, which I'm very happy to pull up, it is longer actually than the resolution that you have in front of you. And so I would say that from just a purely kind of administrative perspective, that if we were to include all of the whereas clauses as Karen has proposed them, two things I think would happen. The first is that the resolution would probably be sent back to committee again. The second is that, and I think the reason for that, kind of second point being, that the resolution becomes very confusing again in terms of what exactly are we asking of DemPed? Kind of what's our point?
Can
So
I
that's a little bit of
insert a
background.
point in there, Matt? And I know that you did say that I can give a little bit more additional context. The entire time, Tanya,
Karen, before I just want to get one little more point.
yes, ma'am.
Not even a
Go ahead.
point. I just want to know, this was a committee decision or was it one person? What specific committee said go back?
Say that again, Tanya. Sorry.
I'm trying to ascertain, was this the concern of one commissioner? Was it the concern of an entire committee? And what committee was that? The ANC as a whole?
It was the commission as a whole. If you go back and watch the video, you'll see the engagement. But I would say, without having kind of counted it, of the 9 commissioners, I think it was a majority. It was 5 to 6 commissioners who raised concerns about the structure of the language and the complication of the resolution and expressing concern over the clarity. So it was 5 to 6. It was a majority for sure of commissioners at the full commission meeting that raised concerns. And the thing that they raised specifically was that the whereas clauses were too many and were difficult to follow as a narrative. The second thing that they said was the our RFP seems to be unclear in terms of what you are asking for and doesn't put DemPed as much on the hook for delivery. And the third thing that they said was we should make sure that the community sees exactly what we are asking for to make sure that the community looks at it and says, yeah, these are the things that we want. This is going to make us this is going to kind of meet the need.
Okay, so, all right, so Karen, I'd like to
Uh, I'll give you a brief rundown. During
give
our
me the
last
politics
meeting,
behind it. That's what I'm trying to get at,
oh
basically.
yes,
What you're saying.
I'm going to give you
What's the
a
politics?
yes, let me give you a briefer description. During our last meeting, we looked at these clauses and we had said that they should be added, and we had a full wordsmithing slash community input from one specific member from the 1617 project who worked with us to get these into the resolution, because during the entire time of the many months and many meetings of listening to the 1617 project, we've never addressed at all anything dealing with the racial equity lens during the entire project. So during that one meeting, we drafted the clauses that were presented. Now, that was the very first time racial equity was presented. However, during the ANC commission meeting, it was not even giving the neither one of the clauses were brought up during that commission meeting. It was not giving the energy that it deserves as to whether or not it deserved to be there. It was so secondary that it was not even respectfully done. We had one community member who said, I and at the end she said, I think the racial equity clauses should stay, and that was it. There was no really definite questions as to what the racial equity clauses entailed. It was not even discussed on the record. Okay. So, this, even though these clauses were presented, it was not read out, nor was it given any type of energy saying that it was a supported energy within that meeting. So, although it was a dance around as to what it was going to be and what was going to be said, the clauses were not read at all. Okay, I sat for the entire meeting. Okay, now knowing that we needed to strengthen that section, I said again in our various emails that we need to revisit it. So the blessing is the commission sent it back. So I've gotten a lot of community members who have said they wanted to see the racial equity clauses in it. And I represented it again, and I'm representing it again. And this time I made sure that everything was well spelled out. As you all see in the document, these are all the clauses. Yes, it may be far more lengthier, but it was never discussed. And I don't mind pulling certain things, but I can give rationale behind each one of those clauses if it's necessary. However, I think the respectful weight that the committee voted on should hold up, because the committee at the time last month really agreed to it. They listened to the community and they took it not politically, Tanya. They listened to it and they took it as it deserves. And we voted that it should go into the resolution. However, what happened in that commission meeting, it was not presented in a well thought out way as far as I'm concerned. And again, that's my perspective. And that's the perspective of the other persons and the community members who saw it too. And I'm bringing it back because I think that it needs the voice that it deserves. And I'm not going to stop because because people may not feel like they want to read something, because it is a document after all. But that's my take. Thank you.
How diverse is the commission, or is it?
How diverse is the commission?
Question.
I don't think, Tanya, that the commission is racially diverse.
Tanya is not
I've got Matthew Holden, Commissioner Holden's hand up. I've also got Arlene in the community. Karen, I want to acknowledge, right, that you are criticizing my presentation of the resolution at the last meeting, and that's fine. Commissioner Holden, you have the floor, and then
and I'm
Arlene will go
glad
to
you
you.
acknowledged it, Matt. It was
Karen, Commissioner Holden has the floor right now, but you can raise your hand again.
Hey,
how
yes.
you cut that off,
I
Matt. Excuse me, Commissioner Holden. Hold on, I'm sorry, Matt.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gall, but we do follow a certain decorum in this meeting. You have had your moment to speak. You are always welcome to raise your hand again. And Commissioner Holden had raised his hand. I called on him. He has the floor, and I will come back to you after Arlene speaks.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about some of the discussion that was at the ANC meeting. So I think overall, the commission is definitely supportive of the ask for racial equity with the resolution, which is one reason why I was happy that it's still called out twice in the updated resolution. But some of the clauses that some people had problems with, in particular, there was one clause speaking of well-resourced newcomers and kind of denigrating people moving into the neighborhood. I think a lot of other commissioners didn't like that language because people move into the neighborhood all the time. There should be nothing wrong with people moving into a neighborhood. And honestly, like well-placed new development being focused on well-resourced newcomers, like the existing development is like exists for well-resourced newcomers. The house next to me just sold for $1 million about a month ago, and a lovely new family is moving in, but it was $1 million. You know, that's not something attainable for most people. And so the neighborhood is already expensive, and here, whether there's new development or not, and if we don't build new places for people to live, the existing places are going to get even more expensive. And so I think the language that kind of talked about those things were one of the problems that some people had with the resolution, not with the notion of racial equity or using making sure the city is considering displacement or supporting longtime African American neighbors in the neighborhood. Those weren't what people were having qualms with. So just to raise that.
And
Yeah.
thank you,
Thank you,
Matt.
Commissioner Holden. Arlene, you're next, and then followed by Karen.
Okay, I listening to the discussion now, I was wondering if we could put these whereas clauses that were taken out, either put them in as is or modify the language a little bit. Can we put them in as an addendum to the resolution so that they do provide the support that Karen is talking about for needing this racial equity tool and engagement, but it doesn't detract from the focus of our resolution or your revised resolution, which I think is much more on target, and I think people will respond to it better. But if we put these as an addendum, then they'll know why these particular elements are there. That was just suggestion. I don't know if you ever do an addendum.
Okay. Well, I mean, Arlene, I think that there's a benefit, right, of saying, how do we keep the ask of DemPed super clear and at the same and also kind of give voice to the community's input that Karen has been collecting and sharing and advocating for. I think that if we were to include language in an addendum, we would have to review the language. I shared with Karen on our last meeting that I felt like a couple of the statements were not controversial; they were confrontational. And I think what Commissioner Holden shared was some of the similar feelings by other commissioners who said, we are always, as a commission, trying to speak in a voice of kind of positivity and engagement and kind of inclusion. And I think that there were some statements that were very oppositional, and folks did not kind of resonate with them. If we were to include them as an addendum, we would need to go through them. We would need to make sure that folks are comfortable with them. If fact checking is required, we need to do fact checking. So I'm open to that. I'm open to that. I am certainly not opposed to having language that builds the case for a racial equity lens being applied. I'm 100% supportive, and I think you heard from Commissioner Holden that the entire commission is 100% supportive. There were some elements that felt like there was a fight being picked, and so folks really kind of resisted that. Tanya, it looks like your hand is up next.
My hand was up, Matt, and it was
Good.
very clearly up,
Good.
and no one called me.
Karen, it moves around. And so, Karen, please go.
Thank you. And Matthew Holden, Commissioner Matthew Holden, I I think what we did was during the last meeting, we were very clear. I asked the question, what is it that made you not uncomfortable? Because every time people talk about racial equity, they get uncomfortable for some reason. But, in spite of the fact that people have been uncomfortable for years on this subject. Um, I asked, what was it, because the language was there, what was it that was uncomfortable? And you very clearly stated that. Um, and so the question was at that particular time, what is the correct language that would make people understand the same sentiment, but still, would not make you feel confrontational, uncomfortable, get your feathers ruffled, whatever makes you uncomfortable. So I appreciate you saying that because that was not really, really clear. However, I think that if we could get around those two words that you said, because everyone should always feel included, which is the reason why racial equity is about inclusion, right? So, and Arlene, as what you were saying, I think that, and we've had the discussions, and the rest of the members with the 1617 project has had this discussion. When you put something secondary, people tend to forget secondary language. And this is a second class situation that is always in the framework of putting it in a secondary place. And again, this is the first time, well, the second time that this has been a discussion. And it's amazing how it gets this energy, but it's necessary in order for us to make sure that the resolution is done. Now, do you do two separate resolutions because of the weight? But the question is, if you do the two separate resolution, will it be respected by DEMPED at all? And we want that to happen. So I'm open to hearing the suggestions of the colleagues on this committee. And Matt, I know that that was your presentation and I understand that, but it was not a slight on how you felt about your presentation. I was just letting you know it didn't meet the mark that was necessary for this particular thing. And that's it. Thank you.
Karen, let me ask you a quick question. If you think about the whereas clauses that you've put into that additional document,
Yes.
if we were to include every single one of those, which I'm not proposing, if we were to include every single one of those, what would you want to see different as an outcome of the now therefores, i.e. the ask of DEMPED? And what would you want to see different as a result in the actual engagement itself? Because part of what I'm trying to figure out is if we put a lot of additional language in, if we have a much lengthier document, what are we getting as an outcome? What's going to change as a result of including all of that? And I think that's one of the things I'm wrestling with, right? Is that I think we've asked for the process that we want to ask for, but if we haven't, we should amend it. But what would you hope to see different as an outcome by including all of those whereas clauses?
Well, if I go through each one of them, which I didn't want to put into this meeting at the end, the very end of the meeting, I could give you an rationale for each one of the clauses, and it will let you know what the outcome would, the result of that particular clause would, the outcome for those particular clauses would give you. However, we're trying to pencil this all in one 5 minute request. And if it got the due deference that the rest of the discussion got, you would be able to get we will be able to get directly to the question that you're asking, Matt. However, I would not want to surmise it all in one 2 minute section. However, I did go through the due diligence of making sure that I can correlate why each one of the clauses against the zonings ask, as well as the DIMPAD alignment, and align each one of the clauses next to that. I don't think that I don't think that we if you guys want to go through it, I'll read it off for you. But if you don't, I wouldn't want you to do that tonight to anybody because it's 9:22 and I don't think anybody could sit through that.
Well, let's do one, right? Let's take one of the
Okay,
whereas clauses,
let's
just
take one.
because I'm
Happy.
curious. I just want to learn kind of how you're thinking
Yes,
about
I
approaching this.
understand. I certainly understand. So let's go to whereas clause D. The district's commitment to racial equity requires proactive measures to ensure the redevelopment process centers the voices, needs, and priorities of African Americans residents and other communities of color who have been historically marginalized in planning and development decisions. Now, we would add that because it connects the district's own stated racial equity commitments, making this a consistency issue rather than a new requirement. So the DIMPAD alignment would basically, DIMPAD has already identified affordable housing, real estate development in underserved communities, and business development focused on historically marginalized entrepreneurs. But as their top three areas for addressing racial equity, this clause will ask them to center these priorities in the U Street project. The Zoning Commission's racial equity tool support the comprehensive plan requires that equitable development is participatory approach for meeting the needs of underserved communities, and that the district applies a racial equity lens by targeting support to communities of color through policies, programs, and focusing on their needs. This clause will basically operationalize those requirements. And I think that if you look at if you look at it from that point of view, I basically broke down each one, the reasoning, and it was a lot of homework, the reasoning behind each one of the clauses because I thought it was necessary because I know our committee likes to dig deep. I don't want to throw things out there without any type of rationale, and that's only under the historical, any of the systemic barriers and the inclusion. And so, and then I go into the further. I broke it down through. Let's look at it from the economic justice and community benefits. The whereas clause on public land redevelopment should advance economic justice by prioritizing community ownership models, local hiring requirements, support the African American owned businesses, and affordable housing that serves existing residents rather than attracting. This is the language that Matthew Holden had brought up, attracting higher income newcomers. Now, I think that it establishes specific criteria for evaluating whether development proposals actually benefit the existing community rather than displacing it. And DIMPAD, of course, they want to know whether or not they said, does commercial ownership target majority African American neighborhoods that has been historically overlooked by investment? This clause will ensure that the U Street project follows the same community benefiting approach. And as far as the zoning commission racial equity tool support, we would use that particular clause to establish a criteria for ensuring that development creates genuine opportunity for existing residents rather than displacing them. So it's mainly more or less a way to ensure that displacement is really, really clarified when it comes to using those clauses. And a lot of that is not really placed into the DEMPAD ask. And that's the reason why these clauses are in, that's one of the outcomes that the clauses will really help to ensure that that anti-displacement language is really, really clear. Does that help you, Matt?
It does. I want to go to the other folks.
Thank you.
I think though, Karen, as I listen to you go through it, I mean, first off, I know you always do your homework, and you have really done your homework here. But I listened to you talk about some of the outcomes you want to get, and one of my thoughts is, gosh, like why aren't we putting more of that knowledge and that expertise into the design of the process and the things that we're asking them to do? I'm not sure that DEMPET is going to reach the same conclusions that you reach based off the whereas clauses, right? When you say, these are the groups that have been ignored. These are the people who have been displaced. I'm not sure that the DEMPED folks reading those whereas clauses are going to reach the conclusion that you reach about the outcome that you're trying to drive to. And
And
so
that's
there's
how I need your help. I want to make sure that I'm not just speaking. First of all, I met with the groups. This what information was done, and I'm bringing it back to the colleagues of the committee. I normally depend on Howard to help me with my wordsmithing because I know how brilliant he is. And I'm not no slight to anyone else on the committee, but that's who I always pitch everything to. So I'm
okay.
looking forward to your input. Thank you.
Okay, Tanya, you've been patient. So Tanya, and then Krishna, and then Howard.
Okay. So I've already admitted that I haven't gone through any details. I'm only making this comment based on what I'm hearing. So what it sounds like to me is that there wasn't a unanimous or total disagreement with the clauses at issue. But some of the language that, for example, the clause that Karen just read that talked about more well-heeled, what Matt raised. And if that's the issue, if the language that has been, because for me, you could have stopped it after ensuring that the African American, I don't know that from my perspective that we have to talk about the well-heeled, I think you get the gist of it by putting a period after you say, if this is what the issue is about, a period after saying, make sure that African American people are involved in this process, have a blah, 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 blah. You don't necessarily need to talk about, in my view, about the well-heeled people coming in. And so if there are clauses like that, then maybe we can just look at those clauses. And we all know already this whole racial equity, given this time and space, is a whole controversial issue in and of itself. And I think it does have value there is, even though I wasn't at the last meeting, there is some value in it being in the overall document. But if there's some language that specifically irritates folks, then let's see where we can deal with that language specifically and move on.
I think that's practical. Krishna, and then Howard, and then Arlene's. No, sorry, we got another member of the audience who's got their hand up. So Krishna, and then Howard, and then we'll go to the audience. Bernadette, I think.
Yeah, my bad. I had my hand up and I did not take it down from previously, so I apologize.
Howard.
Okay, so at the last meeting, I supported adding these clauses to the draft that we had then, and I spoke up in favor of it. I did watch the ANC commission meeting, and I found a lot of their concerns compelling, to be honest. And I thought clearly the inclusion of those clauses, they found to be a bit confusing because they were not tied sufficiently closely to the goal, which was to call for specific forms of community engagement in the development of the RFP. And as I thought more about what those clauses said, I realized that I did have some questions about them, and I'll just raise two. One has to do with the concerns about displacement. Displacement has been a real issue in the U Street area historically,
Yes.
but this particular property is currently a police station and a fire station, and there are no residents there. So, and the expectation is eventually there will continue to be a fire station and a police station and affordable housing. So there's who's being displaced, at least not directly. I don't see people being displaced. Maybe the ripple effects lead to displacement, but that would have to be laid out. And then there's a bit of an ambiguity. We talk about racial equity, which in my mind covers both historical inequities and equity, current and future equity issues, and it covers a variety of racial and ethnic groups. Then on the other hand, there is concerns about the African-American community that has lived in this neighborhood for decades. And a specific focus on that community. So I'm not sure which one we mean, and which one we mean has implications for the direction that this project goes, or even the direction of the community engagement process. So I think there's a lot that needs to be worked out here. And I think I'm not sure it's necessary for the purposes of getting this particular resolution out, which is just a call for specific forms of community engagement. I think the important points that Karen has raised should be part of the discussion in the community engagement process itself. I'm not sure they all need to be in the resolution. And Karen and others may have responses to what I just said. So,
Great. Thank you, Howard. I'm going to promote Bernadette, who had her hand raised. To be able to speak, Bernadette, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, I need to apologize. I have not seen Karen's document, but I found listening to her that the word displacement is not addressed. I also understand where you're saying, well, who are we displacing? I also heard, oh, we're going to have low-income housing, but we have not been assured that we will have low-income housing. And in addition, if you look at what often happens in these developments, what is considered low income isn't really low income. So maybe that needs to be a separate meeting, but I like the word displacement and that we are clear about what that means.
Great. Thank you, Bernadette. And I think maybe to take that a step further, one of the things that I know has been raised by neighbors, and Commissioner Holden spoke about his own experience. There are folks that are nervous that if a big building goes up, it is going to increase the value of their properties. Therefore, their property taxes are going to go way up. And now potentially someone who has been in this home for many, many times with a relatively stable property tax base now all of a sudden finds themselves, having to pay more and more and more every year, and suddenly they are displaced. So it's a real concern. Karen, before I go to you, I just want to say I'm trying to be, and I'm okay if people want to accuse me of being overly pragmatic. I'm trying to be so super focused on and being able to go to DemPad and say, engage this community, because Bernadette's point is 100% right. Like, how much affordable housing at what levels? I think we're going to have to lobby, right? I think we're going to have to lobby. I think we're going to have to put energy into this. I think we're going to have to show up. I think we're going to have to make arguments. Um, and the thing that I'm trying to do is to make sure that we all as a community get at the table to be able to have these conversations. It is not a foregone conclusion that the fire station and the police station stay. I think that everybody thinks it will. I think DemPed thinks it will, but it's important that there is a overwhelming support from the community to say, look, this is something that's important to have inside of our community. I think that there's going to be a lobbying effort that's going to be required to say, we need to have like truly affordable housing. And I don't care how people want to define it, a percent of income or 30% AMI, but 80% AMI is not truly affordable. And so when we look at this, big parcel of public land, how do we advocate? Karen, I appreciate, right? You are a ferocious and I think effective advocate. And and your thoughts are just incredibly well thought out. And part of what I think happened last time is that, and look, a lot of this is things that all of us are learning. Racial equity is some of this, not some of this. Racial equity is to some extent confrontational, right? It's been confrontational for a long time. There are and have been winners and losers, and I think this is why it's an uncomfortable conversation for lots of people. I think that we owe it to this community to continue to have this conversation about racial equity and about the changes, some intended, some unintended, that have happened across U Street over the years, and to think about kind of where do we want to go in the future. And part of that means we got to really grapple with what has happened in the past. Um, and so, I mean, I guess I just want to, thank you, right, for your advocacy and for your smarts and for your research and your willingness to continue to push. And I'm happy, right? I'm happy to table this so that we've got more time to come back as a group and to spend more time talking about it. And I also just want to, acknowledge that I know I'm taking more of a very kind of pragmatic approach of saying, I want all these ideas put on the table in front of a structured, organized, meeting with DemPed where, we're being very clear about what the needs and the goals are, going forward. So apologies for my brief editorial. Karen, I saw your hand went down.
It's still up. I just put it down because I thought you were going to call on me, but
Perfect.
it was.
Karen, and then Krishna.
Yes. And so, Howard, you are absolutely right. There are no current residents on the police fire station site itself, although I think I live in there all the time, and so does the police officers, but and the fire department. But the displacement concern is about indirect displacement, which the zoning commission's racial equity tool specifically requires analyzing, and the immediate area impact. The new development also often increases property values in the surrounding blocks. The ripple effects that you mentioned, the higher property values lead to increased rents, property taxes for existing residents, the business displacement. New development can often price out our existing African American owned businesses. We still have those small mom and pop shops in the area that has been trying to hold on. And then the cultural displacement, it's I really I really wish you all really knew the history of this U Street area. This was the only area that five generations, which I can account for my family, have had changes in the neighborhood character and has pushed out some longtime community institutions. And I'm happy to be here to advocate, as you said, Matt, ferociously and passionately and consistently in these particular things. I know you don't hear me say things as often and being repetitive, but I have to make sure that we stay on this topic because members of our community will be displaced either directly or indirectly as a result of any zoning action. And it requires a consistent analysis of the examples that are happening, racial equity versus African American community focus that language, it ensures that we have a process of benefits for all of the communities of color, and it follows legal and policy frameworks. So that's why you hear that language listed like that. And African American community language really acknowledges the specific historical and ongoing relationship that we have with the African American community, particularly in this corridor. And I think that our strongest approach should be able to lead with broader racial equity framework, which is what I'm really trying to get us aligned with. That's the reason why. But I don't want us to ignore the specific acknowledgement of our African American community's particular stake in this area. And I know that, as you say, Matt, we can always we have to move forward on what it is that we need to do. We just need to make sure that we support something in this with racial equity framework. And I think if we do the historical context, which we can explain why we have the standard engagement that we need, even though it wasn't explained in the document that you presented. I tried to make sure that I mentioned just those 3 points. And then also we need to identify the engagement barriers about the special outreach that's needed that Matthew Holden mentioned. And then also the community benefit focus. I think that if we ensure that the development serves the existing residents, I think we'll be able to tightly connect everything together and get it in a pragmatic point of view that you're trying to reach, Matt Fay. All these Matts in one room. I just want us to make sure that inclusion means coming together. Inclusion means respect, and conversations can eventually become comfortable if we see how we all align together. But we're working together. So this is just a process, and I think we're going to get there. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for bearing with me. I would have appreciated if you brought all that up on, so people can see it, Matthew. That document that I presented, so that people in the audience who is not privy to it, they could have had an opportunity to see what clauses we were discussing. But that's it. Thank you, guys.
Krishna, last comment, and then I'm going to propose a course of action.
Okay. I mean, I guess I just want to say 3 things. One is there's a Q&A. This is from an anonymous attendee, and I just wanted to reiterate it. Whereas, and I'm quoting this, it's the whereas stipulations seem less important than the resolve ask, but whereas the whereas stipulations do give the resolve asks some context for the asks. And I think that's a very insightful comment, because I think that comes down to a lot of this. This is actually my problem with this, Karen, is that these are all whereas clauses. And when DEMPED reads whereas clauses, they tend to glaze over very quickly. And they skip directly to the section and say, this is what the ANC has asked us to do. And that's in the resolve clauses. And I think our resolve clauses that Matt put forward in the resolution do address the racial equity issue. Maybe not in the way that is perfectly comfortable with everyone, and we need to work on that. But the resolve clauses specifically say we need to do something. And I think I just want to reiterate something that Commissioner Fay was saying, is that reality number 1, this development is delayed. Reality number 2, DEMPED does not want to talk to us about what's in the RFP. They really do not want to do that. That's why we are making this ask right now. So we have that opportunity. We are creating that opportunity in 2 years for future ANC to be at a meeting and say, hey, this is what we'd like to see in this RFP when you actually get moving on this. And I think that the resolution that Commissioner Fay put forward will accomplish that. We tried last time. Full ANC shot us down. If we can't figure out a resolution tonight, I think it's getting late. I don't want to keep on arguing this for another hour, and we can go back and visit it another day. But I do think that the important thing that you have to remember is DEMPED does not want to give us an opportunity to meet. And that's why it's so important that we get something done where we put that on the record saying, number 1 thing we want from DEMPED is talk to us before you issue an RFP. That's all we're trying to say.
I agree, and there was no disagreement on that. I think we all are on that page, Krishna, and I do
Well,
appreciate you
there is
bringing that
disagreement,
up.
Karen, because you keep on adding 8 to 10 whereas clauses that are good. You explain the reasonings for them. I really like some of the reasonings, and I think there's some good stuff there. But guess what? The full ANC shot it down. And so we're back, and you want to just add them up again. Full ANC will shut us down again. I mean, we
But
either need to
the
work with the clauses or get rid of them if we
But
want
see,
this
the
passed
thing
by
is,
the
they
ANC.
didn't. Did they shoot? See, now there's the clarification. When we started this conversation, they didn't say they shot it down because of the racial equity clauses. They said they shot it down because of the community engagement. It was the community engagement and the open RFP, whatever. I was the only one hyper focused on the racial equity. That was not even part of the discussion that they shot us down on, Krishna. And that
I have to disagree with you because I
Yeah.
was at that meeting as well, Karen, and that's what I heard. And those whereas clauses were very, very unpopular because the point of a whereas clause is to create a narrative. It's to create context. And we were telling one story about the whereas clauses, then we switched and said, here's the other story about what we want DEMPED to do. And in order to make effective resolution, you have to have that unified. And that's what the
I
resolution
agree.
failed to do. And that's why the full ANC didn't like it.
And
And
that's
so
where
that's our
we were
job, is to fix it or to let it
exactly.
die.
Exactly. And the thing is this, and I'm agreeing with you on that part, Krishna. The question is it possible to fix it adding, and I agree with the anonymous attendee, we need to make it the resolve needs to equal with the whereases, but it needs to make sure, and that's the whole point of
I
us
think if we
working
want to fix it,
together.
Karen, you need to take those 12 whereas clauses and, as Commissioner Fay suggested, narrow it down to one or two. And I think that's what we need to make an effective resolution. I'm not hearing that we're coming to that conclusion tonight, so I don't want to waste everyone's time here if we can't actually get a resolution passed tonight.
Okay, so everyone had a chance to look at them. And I've given what I've had, and you all had, I mean, put those big brains to work and find out which ones we can take out of it. That's what
I'm
I'm
gonna propose, yeah, I'm gonna propose a different course of action. I don't like this course of action, but um it's not fair. It's not fair to the committee. It's not fair to the work that you did, Karen, to say, hey, on the spot, take a look at these and think about the ones that you want. We don't have time to do the justice to it. The second is that the more that we have talked through this and the more that you explained the connection between the whereas clause and how you hoped it to impact the outcome, I'd rather spend some time thinking about refining and enhancing the outcome, which is the now therefores, than adding a ton of uh, uh, adding a ton of whereas clauses up front.
okay.
So what I'm going to propose, that we table this conversation, that we take it up again in September, and that between now and then, the committee members review the Word document that Karen had shared. I do not think that we need to include all of the whereas clauses. I do recall asking in our last meeting if we could consolidate the whereas clauses to, two, and the answer was no, they were all individually important, and so we ended up with something closer to 5 or 6. And so I don't want to go down that same path again. So I'm going to propose, but I'm open to other options. I do not think we have time to do justice to a thorough review of all of the whereas language that Karen has proposed tonight. That would be unfair to the process. Uh,
I'll try to
Howard,
summarize something, Matt. How about I'll do that? I'll do three. I'll come up with three. I like remedies and I like hearing what people has to say. And I think you guys gave me a good argument. And I'll do part of the homework and I'll come up with at least three that I think are really, really strong that meets in the criteria. And then I'll bring it and I'll present it to the committee via email, and you all can let me know what your thoughts are. How does that sound?
Howard, go ahead, and then I'll respond.
Sorry if I cut you off.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was going to say, first I was going to say, Matt, I like your approach of focusing on the resolve clauses, because that's where the action is. But I am open to certainly considering reconsidering the whereas clauses. Um, Karen, the link to the file that you put in the chat, it didn't work for me at least. So that's why I was not able to download. So if you could send both your original clauses and any revisions that you're going to suggest to us by email, I would appreciate that.
No problem. And I think what I'll do is listening to you, the comments that you all have all offered. I think they're really great comments. I am going to look at I'm gonna look at this a little bit more thoroughly because I was not intending to add the resolve clauses, but I should have. I just was adding in the whereas clauses because we were doing the wordsmithing
No,
last month.
I'm gonna propose something slightly different. Karen, you choose the three whereases, or you refine three whereases, and then what I would like to do is I would like to get together with you and Howard and anybody else on the committee that wants to, and I want to talk through them, and I want to say what are we really trying to accomplish with this, and if we decide that we're going to revise our now therefore clauses to kind of strengthen our ask and make it more specific. And if we think that it's a whereas clause because it really builds the case, but let's just focus on the whereases as step one. Let's get some time scheduled for at least the three of us. It'll be an open invitation to everybody else who wants to come, and let's get that squared away because I want to make sure that we get something done. And this will not be the last development conversation that we have in this group. So it's important that we've got a good foundation and that we've got a healthy dialogue and that we are all learning from each other as we go through this.
Sounds great. I appreciate that. And I think that this is the part two of the racial equity out of the many that we've had with the other ones. And I think this is a good dot. But we're going to get this clear as far as what I understand. Knowing me, I'll probably work on this tonight and have something good to give to you guys by our next meeting. But thank you.
Sounds good. All right. Krishna, did you want to give a quick update on Studio Theater?
Yeah, I'll be very quick for everyone. You know, in November, we had Constellation Theater come in to this committee, talk about their future at the Source Theater. There was some hope in January that Constellation had raised enough money to actually buy the Source Theater from the owners, Cultural DC. It is now apparent that that is not the case. There has been a bit of brouhaha on Popville on this. The two parties do not like each other and are sort of disputing sort of the facts. But the end story is that I think we are losing Constellation as a tenant, and we're most likely losing the Source Theater as an arts theater. It is being sold to a developer who wants to turn it into a pool hall. I would say there's sort of two issues that come to mind. One is, and it may not be appropriate in this committee, I do believe that's on one of the blocks where there's a 50% restriction on bar and entertainment use, and it's well over 50% on that block right now. I don't believe they have a current liquor license, and so I don't know how you plan on opening a billiards place with no liquor license. That doesn't seem like a good business model. As I said, probably not in our committee's jurisdiction, but we could raise it to our friends over on alcohol. Two is, I think it's just a larger discussion that we need to have about what is the arts usage that we want in our community. And one of the things that when I had spoken to Cultural DC is that they were really trying to say, well, we're moving away from the performing arts. We think that there's maybe too many performing art venues, not enough money. We want to do something different with the performing than performing arts. And that's really, in the end, up to them. There's nothing we can do about that. But I think it's just a good way of framing our future discussions on the comp plan, which is really what we need to be focusing on now, about what is the arts usage that we really want to see in our community. So that's my update. I just sent around the Popville article in the chat. I think I sent it around on email earlier today. I think it gives out the facts pretty well as we understand them right now.
Great. I mean, not great. Thank you for the update. It's a big loss, I think, for the community. Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question, Krishna. So if not the performing arts, what are they talking about? Visual arts, like galleries, or?
So I tried to sort of press the woman from Cultural DC on that. As far as I know, Cultural DC is looking more at the visual arts, which is wonderful. Cultural DC actually funded one project over by Garrison. I think it was last year. It was that giant wax candle of Lincoln that was melting.
Oh yeah.
It was actually pretty cool. And there was supposed to be a cultural arts component of Grimkey, although no one really wants to tell me what is being done there. They were given like 1,000 square feet for exhibit space, but I'm never sure exactly what's happening. So I do think that they're looking more at sort of visual arts and things like that rather than performing arts.
Got it. All right. I did not have any new business agenda items on the agenda. Did anyone have any other new business that they wanted to raise? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for another robust discussion. Appreciate it. We are continuing to learn with and from each other, and our 3 community members who hung in until the very end. Thank you for your patience and your commitment. We are adjourning tonight at 9:55. Have a good night, everyone, and enjoy your weekend. Talk to you all soon.
Good night.